What's up, y'all? I'm back. Today we have another pairing of biography slash memoirs. First, we have Eve, who's that girl, and then we have Earl, the autobiography of DMX. So let's get into it. First, what they both have in common. These are both books by um, rappers who also then like had a stint with acting and a lot of other things, had a huge influence on rap in general. Two, they're both books about progression through like the music industry and their life in general, almost like a coming of age story, more so DMX, less so Eve, but still you kind of see that like coming of age. And also there were books about just the pressure and the expectations of like rising to that stardom point. What that looks like, sacrifices that had to be made, decisions that had to be made, and things like that. And also, DMX and Eve both had like humble beginnings. They both kind of started out in a battle rap kind of state, which I'm seeing with rappers. That's more common than I initially thought. Like I always thought that the battle rappers like Cassidy and stuff like that, but that's only because they actually stayed almost stayed like battle rappers. But a lot of people got their start like that. DMX mentioned in his book like Jay-Z and him battle rap and stuff like that. So that's what they both have in common. But first, I'm gonna review them in the order that I actually read them in. So first, I read Eve's book, Who's That Girl, and I actually I debated on whether I should pair her book with Trina's autobiography, or DMX's autobiography. Ultimately, I chose DMX, but I honestly feel like Trina would have been a better pairing just because E's autobiography and DMX's was so different. Like they were different on so many levels. I feel like Trina's might have been closer to Eve's, but whatever. Here we are. With Eve's autobiography, she mentioned a lot about what's it like being the underdog. Like, you're in a woman and male dominated fields. People kind of underestimate you. Same thing with DMX to a certain extent. They underestimate you and they want to keep you in a box. She talked about kind of breaking through barriers, how she didn't want to stay chained to a certain kind of sound, how she wanted creative control of what she was doing at the time. Same thing with DMX. And how that led her to joining Rough Riders as the first lady. She described herself as like the pit bull in a skirt, which was so fitting because she ended up joining the Rough Riders, and Pit Bulls was like had DMX's heart, so that was kind of cool to see that. But also, it kind of spoke to her character in a certain way, and like kind of like the heart of her book, if it wasn't so surface level. She kept a lot of stuff kind of close to her chest. This was the only memoir slash autobiography I've read where even when she was referencing certain people, typically, like, let's say, I don't know, typically people will give like a pseudonym if they don't want to just like outright give a name. She didn't even give you that. She was just like this person, this dude, this guy, like this girl. They didn't even get a name. She really, and I don't know if that was like, I don't even want to focus on them and get them that attention or like that satisfaction or whatever. But to me, it just felt kind of like you could like you can get him a pseudonym, like something. I literally had to Google stuff as I'm reading it to see who she was talking about. I know she probably didn't want to get like in any problems, have people like telling her that she's slandering their name and stuff, but I just thought that was interesting. And also when she went into detail about her life, like when she, had her stint at the strip club and when she was like first met Mace and stuff like that, it was very even when she like touched on her religious journey and like her spirituality, it still was very surface level. Like you just didn't get as deep as I wanted it to. And I read quite a bit of biographies this year. This one was probably the most surface level and the most superficial. Not her story. Her story was good, but like the storytelling in the book, it was very much like I'm telling you, like a secondhand person telling you about Eve's life and not her putting you in her shoes and like walking you through her life. Yeah, that's the best way I can describe that. What I can say though about her book, which I loved, was it was very reflective. So when I'm reading like an autobiography or a memoir, I like to see the progression in like maturity and in thought when a person is telling a story. So she'll be like, at the time I did this because of this, but now looking back with everything I know and the wisdom that I acquired over the years, I know that that was like a response to this. So that was a trauma response. Or if I could tell myself something at that time, it would be this. So I definitely appreciated like the reflection in it because not all memoirs do that. Like one I just went over, I'm not gonna go into, but I'm glad to see that you can see like the growth in her life and in her mindset, especially now that she's a mom and a wife. So that was kind of cool to see. But that was the best part of it because everything else it had like the makings of a really good book. It was just she just gave you like a little dab, not enough to really like sink your teeth in and feel like you really understood where she was coming from. It was like somebody else was telling her story from a first person point of view. But overall, I still liked it. I enjoyed hearing about like how she got to where she got, how she was surrounded by like a group of men that were protectors. Because I just assumed, let me be honest, and this is biased, it's biased. I assume that when you're a woman in the music industry surrounded by men, especially when she was in the Rough Riders, so I assume that when she in these spaces, you in clubs promoting your music, and you're surrounded by these hood dudes essentially. I assume that you're constantly being taken advantage of, or at least people are trying to. I assume that you in a very vulnerable place and you always like on guard because you're always like the eye of an attack for somebody. That's the way that I looked at it. But when I read her book and she described how she was surrounded by some real like stand up dudes that were very protective of her, very much like on her side, that was refreshing to read because I didn't expect that for real. I thought that it would be like she was just thrown to the wolves and she was the only one protecting herself essentially. So it was good to see that she was around some really solid dudes at the time, and I was glad to read that. Okay, so jumping into DMX's autobiography. I think it was written by Smokey Fontaine. Yeah. Um it was like everything I just said about Eve's book, flip that on his head, and that's essentially like DMX's book. It was very much written from his point of view. It was very much you like come take a walk in my shoes and let me like walk you through this. Not a secondhand account, but like through my eyes and in my head. Let me like show you what I went through, where that led me, how that affected me, and then how that helped me become the person that I am today. And I appreciated that. What I can say is I love when a biography or a memoir doesn't like force you to think that the person that it's writing about is all good. Like this person is just amazing, is somebody to aspire to be, and there is no wrong. Like they're the golden kid. And this book was the opposite of that. I've been talking to my husband about this book all week because it's so different than other like memoirs or biographies that I read because he was talking about stuff that you would think typically people would be ashamed about or they would like shy away from, not shy away from, but they wouldn't just offer up this information. They wouldn't divulge these kind of details because it's embarrassing. He was not embarrassed. He was not ashamed. He was like, I did what I did. I said what I said. I am who I am, and that's just what it is. And it was like to me, I appreciated that. He was not he was not like sugarcoating stuff that he did, places he'd been, situations he was in. And it was a nice change from other biographies that really want to paint people in the best light and only share like selective hardships that just like to get an emotional response. Some of the stuff he said, that some of the details he didn't have to say it because it didn't add to like anything except the fact that you could be like, wow, he's really putting it all out there. And it wasn't to like elicit an emotional response from the reader. To me, it was really just like, look, this is it is what it is. That's what happened. And I was really like, wow, like I would never have said that. Which, how I said Eve's book was super reflective because she was like thinking back over the years, like, wow, in this time I was this, I was that, and I've grown in these ways. DMX's book was reflective in another way because it made me reflect on myself. Like, it almost was like a mirror because I was like, I would never say that. Like, you would never catch me. You couldn't waterboard that information out of me. Then I had to step back and be like, why? Like, I'm prideful in that way, you know? So I had to like look at myself and think back, like, wow, I really, like, do I really care about what people say like that? Because he just put it out there and like, look, I'm me. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want people to see like that part of me. I don't want people to know like even if my testimony could bless somebody, I still don't want you to like you gonna look at me differently if you know that one thing that I did. And he just didn't have that like no inhibitions. He was just out there with it, and it really made me think like, why do I have such a hesitation on sharing with people, even like in a one-on-one setting? I don't want to tell people my business like that, even if I feel like I'm led to do it at that time. So it made me think about myself, how I have some pride in some ways, how I do still care about what people think in some areas. And that's like when a book make you reflect on yourself, it's a good day for readers, you know what I mean? So his book was it was different in a lot of ways. It was sad in a lot of ways. He said some things that you just don't know what people go through, man. And what I can say is when I read it, there were certain times that kind of reminded me of how I felt reading like Marvin Gaye's book, where it was like this duality of a man where you got like this spiritual tug in between, like almost like living in two worlds. And that's kind of what I got in Marvin Gaye's book and what I got in DMX's book, where it's like you really like battling these demons and you being pulled in two different directions, and in a process you're affecting other people, and in the process you encouraging other people, you influencing other people, and you just don't know the type of impact you having on other people's lives. And then when you gone, they both ended in a tragic way, both of their stories. When you're gone, like it's just tragic. What I can say is what I wanted from Eve's book, I got from DMX's book. But his book was written in 2003. And I feel like it kind of ended at the point where he had just like he was fresh in his success. So we went through all the pain and heartache, the initial pain and heartache, childhood, coming of age story. Then you got to the point where he just reached like his success in the music industry, and then it was kind of like the end of the story. After the story, he had way more kids. He was fresh in his marriage in the end of this book, so he had a decade more of marriage at the time. He had so many other trials and tribulations and successes that I kind of wish, like where Eve's book, it like was recent and you got to see that entire progression of her life. I kind of wish his book was written like 10, 15 years after it was, because I feel like it's just so much more realizations and so much more story that needed to be told. And I think from how he ended the book that he actually did accomplish what he wanted to, but I would like to know like if he actually thought that, you know, what he thought later on in life. So those are the two books that I paired today. I like them both for very different reasons. I feel like I can relate to Eve's story somewhat, not as much as I probably could if she would have went more in depth, but like being a woman that you want to be a leader, but you know, then you're a wife, you're a mom, you got a lot going on, kind of carving your own path. So like I did relate to that. But again, it wasn't deep enough to for me to really like put myself in her shoes. But yeah, that's it for today. Both books were great. If I had to suggest one to people, Eve's book is way more PG. Like it wasn't PG, but compared to DMX's, it was PG. His book was rough. It was raw. I don't know if he even let people edit it because I was like, that's something. But anyways, her book is way more like clean around the edges. His is very rough. So both of them are good, especially if you grew up in that era and you actually listen to their music. So that's it for today. Thank y'all for checking in. Let me know if you read them in the comments below and what you think about it. Thanks.